Hi everybody, I'm Susie from Money A&E. Today I'm really pleased to be joined by Alistair Rooms. Alistair is a community organiser with Newham Citizens, part of the East London Citizens organisation, which is an alliance of trade unions, charities, schools and universities and faith groups who work together to make East London a better place to live. Alistair works on a number of different issues as a community organiser, including housing, which is what we're talking about today. So Alistair, thank you very much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
No worries, likewise, it's good to be with you.
So my first question is, why is housing such a crucial issue in Newham at the moment?
So I think there's a couple of answers to this question. I think so. A little bit of my work really is working with an alliance of 23 different organisations in the borough, and we think a lot about the issues people face, and then think about what are the structural solutions to those problems, and how can we build kind of campaigns to tackle them at kind of structural or root cause level. Really kind of built on the idea that people can act for themselves on the issues that matter to them, and I think housing comes up a lot in the work that we do in Newham. It's cuts across so many of the issues that we work with as well. A lot of the schools we work with have big housing issues for the parents, and a lot of we work a lot with Caritas Anchor House, who are a kind of homelessness charity in Canning Town, and I think it's partly so crucial at the moment because home is where we have our security. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now for a lot of people. And we've had a housing crisis in London, at least, for a number of years now. But with so much uncertainty around the economy, people are really struggling, and home provides a bit of a safety net for them. Some of the kind of experiences people that we work with on quite a regular basis there's a lot of experiences of overcrowding. And people who are really, I think, in Newham, in East London, the old East End, at the sharp end of the housing crisis. And so, families of 7 who are living in a 1-bedroom flat, sharing a device to do their homework on, has been a real issue for some of the schools and colleges that we work with. And people are really kind of at the cold face of the housing crisis. And for a lot of people who have lost jobs or on furlough previously as well, that's been a real challenge for people. It's also just, I think, for a lot of people we work with, a lot of the families that we work with, there's very little hope, basically, because the housing crisis is so big, and the process of getting a council home is such a long list. I think in Newham we have 28,000 people on the housing waiting list for social housing. That's changing at the moment, but that's a huge amount of people who are ahead of you in the queue. So for a lot of people that we work with, there feels like there's not much hope around housing on this issue. So I think it's really important for a lot of people that we can think about how do we tackle that, what are the solutions to the housing crisis that we face.
That definitely reflects our experience at Money A&E. Rent arrears are the number one form of debt that people have been coming to us with during COVID-19. And for a lot of our service users as well, overcrowding, homelessness and spending a long time on waiting lists for council housing or for suitable housing for larger spaces, it's that's something that our community is facing a lot, for sure, unfortunately. And what can we do as citizens, as ordinary people, to tackle some of this crisis, some of these issues?
That's a good question. So I think there's a number of ways to break down the issue of housing, and often in the work that we do in community organising, we're thinking about, how do we have a problem like the housing crisis, and how do we break it into issues and pieces which we can begin to tackle and pick up, essentially. So I think and one of the things we're best known for is around the living wage campaign, which we started 20 years ago. And essentially there's kind of 2 main ways of attacking an issue. One is by building a better solution. So how can we build something that is an example of something that we can do, or to kind of create an example of something that works in a better way? And the other is around kind of going after the bad guys, if you want a kind kind of story around that. So thinking about who is benefiting from this, and how can we kind of work with them to make change around the issue, basically. So I think one of the things that we've been doing at London Citizens, Citizens UK, is pioneering community land trusts. So a kind of form of home ownership that is tied to median income in the area. So the sale of the home is based at no more than a third of the average income in the area, which was kind of a principle embedded into the structure of building the homes to say that no one should be spending more than a third of their rent on housing. I know in Newham and in London broadly, a lot of people spend up to half, if not more than half of their wages on housing, which is partly why we're in such a crisis. So we've begun to build community land trusts across London. We've got the first one was in St Clement's Bow, and we've been running campaigns all across London to get these kind of forms of genuinely affordable housing up and running across the city. There's a number of projects in the pipeline, basically, with the different councils from Redbridge down to Lewisham, Lambeth, and we're working on a project with E16 Community Land Trust right here in Newham as well. So thinking about how can we build some genuinely affordable homes for people to be able to stay in the area. I think churn is a big issue for a lot of people. One of the primary schools we work with lost 14 families last year. So 14 students who started the year didn't complete their school year because they were moved because of housing issues. Now that makes operating as a school very difficult, and we make the argument that they need to get involved in organising to begin to change those issues. But that school had been a big part of the campaign for a community land trust in the borough, and we're in discussions with the council about where we could begin to get a community land trust. The other thing that we've been doing as an organisation in Newham is thinking about who are the people who really benefit from this crisis. I think it's no secret that, you know, housing developers have made a lot of money, and I think like ultimately that's harmed a lot of people. I know in 2016 75% of the houses bought in zone 1 and 2 were bought by people who lived outside London, right?
Really?
So
that figure,
homes are being built.
That figure surprises me. I didn't realise it was that high. Yeah, it's shocking.
So homes are being built, but they're being bought by people as an investment, not as somewhere to live, right? And so how can we begin to do something different, and how can we make the case to housing developers that they have a role in tackling the housing crisis as well, and beginning to do that? So I think there's a development which is quite an iconic development in Newham on the old site of the West Ham ground, Upton Park. So where the West Ham football stadium was, they moved to the Olympic Stadium for their new football ground. And obviously that's quite an iconic East London kind of place, I guess. And football team, I think, to go anywhere.
I live
down the road, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to go. Okay. Well, it's hard to go anywhere in East London without hearing about West Ham. And so the developer who originally bought that site proposed to build 0% affordable housing on that site. So 0% affordable housing as a basis. And this was under the previous council. A number of organisations locally got really frustrated about that and said you can't do that in our neighbourhood, basically. The school which I mentioned, there was a young student called Ruth who led one of our campaigns. She was, I think she was a year 5 student at the time, and we worked with her and her family. She was really angry about the housing crisis, partly because her best friend had been moved out of the borough, and she kind of felt powerless to do anything about that. So there was a group of students from the school, some of the residents from Anchor House, and some of the kind of leaders who we've worked with over the years, and some of the church leaders who work on housing, who campaigned to get more affordable housing on that site, and led a big campaign to ask the council to do that. They were successful in that, and the level of affordable homes went from 0 to 20%, which really isn't that high. That was under the previous administration, and then the new mayor came in, Roxana Fiaz, who's kind of set a higher bar for developers. So I believe that they've really, again, increased the levels of affordability in that site and ask the developer to go higher in terms of the affordable housing that they produce on that site. So I think that's something we can do basically, is think about, you know, who are the people who are buying land in your neighborhood and what are they going to do to benefit the neighborhood? And I think we'll have a role as kind of civil society in making that case. We've been recently doing this with some Anchor House residents and a developer who's bought some land to develop a big kind of housing site just behind Caritas Anchor House in Canning Town, and developing a relationship with them to think about, well, actually, what can you do for people here? And begin to do that, and really hold developers to account, basically.
Yeah.
They're very accountable to their shareholders. I think it's up to us to make the case to them that things need to change and that we're here as well. Yeah, there was a great moment actually where some of the Anchor House residents invited the developer to come into Anchor House to have a tour. The developer were afraid of it, basically. And some of the residents kind of said, yeah, they're afraid of being shamed about what they see, but actually we're here and we're going to be their neighbours. So they dressed up in their smartest clothes and welcomed the developer to Anchor House basically and showed them a tour around and they formed a relationship off the back of that with the developer to begin this conversation. Basically.
Yeah. It sounds like you're coming at it from a standpoint of, like you say, trying to form a friendly working relationship rather than criticising or being kind of on the defensive. A lot of people watching this will be Newham citizens or living in East London, or many people also working in schools, teachers, community groups, etc. How can people support the kind of work you're doing or get involved in similar initiatives?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, like the first thing is to get in touch, basically, and see how we can do that and get in touch with us and think about how they can join one of our teams. And we're forming a housing team at the moment who can take action on these issues and can join the work that we do. So if people want to do that, we'd love to have them be involved in some of the housing action teams that we have and kind of be involved in that process moving forwards, basically. I think we work through an institutional model. So our model is about institutional membership. So kind of organisations can join citizens and be part of that and work with the alliance to make change on that issue. And so they can be involved that way as well through their organisation. But yeah, please do share my details with everyone. That'd be great if you want to get in touch and want to be involved in that. I think like we sort of work to walk through the process with people about how you can make change. But that's not to say you can't do it without us, right? Like, who are the developers coming to your neighborhood? Thinking about that a little bit, thinking about what you want from them, and if they're going to be your neighbors, how will that relationship work for you, and what does that look like for your organization, for your neighborhood, and the change that's coming? How will you benefit from that? Because it's going to happen. But I think it's really important that we're ready and able to kind of make the most of that change for the communities that we work with, and begin to form these relationships essentially, that are mutually beneficial. Yeah.
What are the factors behind Newham's housing crisis? We've talked about overcrowding, lack of affordable rent. Is it a supply and demand issue, do you think, or is it more complex than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a complicated picture, right? I think Newham is particularly like a special case in many ways because it's an arrival point for a lot of people who come to the UK, and so there's a lot of kind of pressure on housing as well. It's also kind of an East London borough which is booming at the moment, full of people with gifts and who are coming to East London, and so are kind of right in the heart of the city. And I think I do think there's some structural things which are at play here. I think one is a kind of, I guess, decline in the number of kind of social housing developments we've seen over the years. I think that's changing now. I think the new mayor in Newham has done a lot of work to really improve the levels of affordability that developers are coming into the borough with. I think she set a 50% affordable housing threshold. And as I understand it as well, they've been turning away any developer that proposes any less than that, which I think is a really incredible step.
Mm-hmm. I know she's made it a priority for her administration and set very ambitious targets. Yeah.
For sure. And I think there's a lot of, I think right to buy has been a real challenge in terms of the council homes available for people and kind of for the housing crisis as well. But I do think, as I say before, there's a lot of challenges with housing being bought as an asset, not for a home. And a real challenge around that in London as a whole. But also that we've in a sense, we've kind of defined affordable housing at a rate which isn't really affordable for a lot of people. One of the things that we've been saying is that shared ownership is a form of affordable housing. But if I was to pull up some of the prices for shared ownership homes, most people that I work with, that would be far out of their realms of possibility. And actually that's for kind of higher salary earners. So it isn't really genuinely affordable for a lot of people. And so I think there's some real challenges around that, both at a national level. And I think Newham is really at the coalface of the housing crisis in that way as well, where people have a kind of multiple challenges. I work with a mother who moved into temporary accommodation when her son was 2. He's now 18, you know, and that was supposed to be temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
So she's been moved a couple of times in temporary accommodation, but that isn't temporary. And I think, Newham is right at the coalface of that. And the other thing I would say is good to see that Newham Council have been really keen to think about what are some solutions and innovative solutions to the temporary accommodation challenges that they have, and getting people kind of into that. I think, and I've been really good at doing that. One of the projects that we worked on in East London is over in Ilford, one called Project Malachi, which is a kind of modular home set up for people who are homeless or extremely vulnerable, basically, and provide them with a kind of space of safety and a space of home for a short while. And we're exploring what that might look like currently in very, very early stages in Newham, to think about what that might look like as well. So I think it's not just up to, I think people often think that they look to the council to solve everything in lots of ways. And actually, the housing crisis is so big, such a big crisis that it needs everyone's energy on it. Yeah. It's not just kind of one simple solution. There are many solutions, and I think it takes a lot of working alongside the council, alongside developers, to think about what this solution looks like and really build that together. I think it's interesting you talked a bit about hope there. One of my favourite writers, Rebecca Solnit, she says that we think often of hope as a lottery ticket, but it's more like an axe, basically. And we've got to break down doors with hope. And we have to get off our sofa from clutching a lottery ticket to actually begin to do some action, and use hope as an axe, basically, to create the world that we want to.